Hello, I am Kevin Anderson.
And I'm Adam Okada.
And we are clinical educators and hosts of the Ask the Educator podcast, brought to you by Healthmark, a Getting a company.
Are you a sterile processing technician, infection preventionist, or biomedical engineer? No matter your role, if you're involved in medical device processing, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to equip you with the knowledge and tools for excellence in medical device processing.
Now let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is Kevin, your host, and with me as usual, Adam Okada. For this episode, we are following up our international webinar with our speaker, who was Malinda Elammari, one of our very own here at Healthmark. And this one was a fun one where we kind of let Malinda explore Nightmare on SPD Street, which of course is always a good time because, well, maybe some of you enjoy horror films. I actually used to until I got married, and then I could no longer watch them anymore because my wife's a scaredy cat. But that's okay because we have plenty of Nightmare on SPD Street to fill that void. So, Malinda, you had a bunch of examples throughout the webinar, and no podcast would be complete with the packaging princess if we didn't maybe kick it off with some of the peel pouch and wrap issues that you highlighted in the Nightmare on SPD Street webinar.
Yeah, there was quite a few in there, right? It seems to be an ongoing trend lately. Or maybe I'm just honing into it. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things, I think, Malinda, where once you kind of train your eyes to see it, it's like it just jumps out at you all the time. And I think that's totally normal. I think it reminds me of back in the day when I worked in the ER and all I did was draw blood. So, and like when people would come and it didn't matter where it was, the hospital, or if I met you in a social situation, I'd automatically be looking for a good vein, like.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
I know, right? I know.
You identify as a vampire after that?
Partly, yeah. I mean, it still is something that I can't help but notice about people, but I know it's a little different, but
this is getting creepy. You're checking out people's veins? Wow. I don't know, Kevin.
only for blood specimen, collection purposes.
I would stop. You're just digging deeper and deeper. This is getting weirder and weirder.
All right. Well, take it over then.
So, I mean, there was quite a few things that we talked about around packaging. Packaging being used improperly was one of the key factors, too, that we see a lot. And what I mean by that is utilizing peel pouches incorrectly, right? So, for instance, I'm utilizing peel pouches to separate my extra instruments and storage, using them to hold records like my sterilization records, or my favorite one is, and we're all guilty of this one, I used to do it all the time as well. If there's a instrument missing from a vendor tray or just shows up a random instrument, we put it inside a peel pack, we hang it on the wall with steam tape, and we say, hey, does this belong to you, kind of thing, right? So doing that kind of concept really creates a problem when we think about mitigating risks, right? Our job is to mitigate those risks, and utilizing pouches out of their use of just as a sterilization barrier system, then you now increase the risk of, maybe, let's just say, Adam's like, oh, hey, I need this size peel pack and I ran out. Oh, look, there's one hanging on the wall. Let me just dump the stuff out and use it, right? Now, should people do that? Obviously not. But the question is, can they? And, if Adam's there, of course he can. So, we don't want to we don't want to give people that option. And so that's really what I refer to by mitigating the risk in your department. Your peel pouches should only be used for sterilizing items. And the same concept goes for your wraps, like your disposable wraps. We see them being utilized in so many different areas. They put them on the floors, they put them on workstations, um, lining shelves. That's another one that we see wraps being used for. First of all, wraps are not absorbent. So, they're not made to absorb liquids and fluids. So, utilizing them on your workstations and stuff kind of just it defeats the whole purpose, right? Second of all, once again, if I have a wrap on a table and I've been putting trays on top of it all day, and now somebody says, "Oh, I need that size," or they didn't see that, maybe they think that wrap is just there and I can grab it and use it. So we don't want that to happen. Um, Another thing we see is like, I didn't even go into this one, like filters, using filters to write notes. Like people make notes and, it's like, no, they're not note paper. We can't do that. And then steam tape, like, or sterilization tape in general. That one we see people just, sometimes you go in departments and it's like they had a party and they just decorated in tape. Like it's everywhere. So it leaves residue on the surfaces, which makes it harder for you to clean the surfaces and stuff. But, once again, is there a possibility somebody can grab that piece of tape and use it? It sounds crazy and it sounds so off the wall that people, with any, experience would be like, no, we would never. But it's a possibility. You can do it. So we don't want to give people that option.
First of all, spot on impression of me, by the way. And this is, yeah, I know you nailed that. But um,
You're welcome.
when you're in the department, it does seem to be like a separation of, oh, this peel pouch is only for storing this weird thing, or we're just using this wrap to line a shelf. But that's really the wrong purpose for it. The other thing that surveyors see when they see that is, how do you know that that wrap's not going to be used on a set or on a patient? How do you know that that set's not going to be used on a patient? So those are always things that you have to look out for in your departments. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which you had such great visuals in the webinar, such great pictures. And one of the things you focused on was the environments, or the sterile processing environment itself. There were so many things. Excessive dust was one of them. I know we talked about cell phones. I'm trying to think of all the other things, but there was a lot of environmental concerns that you brought up in that webinar. I saw the wooden crucifix, since it's very appropriate for the Nightmare on SPD Street. What advice do you give to a department when you're assessing the environment? You see these kinds of issues throughout.
Yeah. 5, 6, grab your crucifix. It just worked out great.
Nice.
Um, I would, first of all, I wanted to say with the pictures in my presentation, I had on each slide multiple pictures of situations, right? It wasn't just, I really tried, I didn't want to overload it, but I tried. The reason for that was I was trying to show that this is not just a one place issue. We're seeing this in so many different locations, and each picture was from a different location. So every time, it's just like, okay, we're seeing this over and over again, and just trying to get the word out. So for environmental, dust is a big one. We're seeing dust everywhere in bins. So people think, okay, I have peel packs in storage in bins, but nobody cleans the bins. Nobody goes through and does a rotation of making sure those bins are cleaned. Bins that are holding supplies at their workstations, you look down deep inside those bins and there's like a whole family of little dust bunnies growing and gathering inside of those. And then like let's say, for instance, your ceiling vents, those, once again, are they being put on a rotation to be cleaned? Are they being cleaned on a monthly basis? Is there a sign off? What we're seeing a lot is that there is a lack of EVS or environmental services and sterile processing collaboration. When I ask people, they say, well, EVS never comes in here. Or, well, they come in here, but they just, you know, run the mop, aka, quote unquote, and then they're out the door. There needs to be a conversation, a sit down and say, okay, this is what you are responsible for. This is what my team is responsible for, because we can't place the blame totally on EVS. We have responsibilities within a department as well to keep it clean, and so we have to align and spell out who's responsible for which area, which part, and what does that look like? I always say each department should have a task chart. I used to call it a chore chart, and somebody was like, don't call it a chore chart. And I was like, okay, fine. A task chart. And I would assign people to do things like check for expiration dates, dust the bins, do a par level, those kind of things that us as managers, or leaders, we tend to believe that we have to do everything ourselves. And that is not the case. We can help assign it to our staff. And it also, what it does is it gives them ownership of their own department. They now take responsibility for their department, and it teaches them things that they're supposed to be paying attention to and looking for. So when they move up into leadership positions, because that's our job, is to be teaching them and training them, they now know, hey, oh yeah, I remember I had to check par levels and I had to dust and I had to do this. So these are things that we need to pay attention to. So I think, we kind of fail in that aspect, and we think we're just pushing the work. And it's not about pushing the work, it's about constructively dividing the tasks and teaching your staff how to grow and what they need to look for. But environmental wise, there's a lot of things, food and drinks. That was another thing. Like, you would imagine in today's day, we would know better whether, like, to eat or drink in sterile processing. Um, However, it's still going on, like, we went into one department, this was months ago though, but we went into one department and they had like a whole 6-course meal in there, and they were just like, "Oh," and they were so nice. They were like, "Do you want a sandwich? Do you want a drink? Are you hungry? Do you want," and I'm like, "Do you want any snacks?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you." So A, for hospitality, but, like, the concept on why they can't eat in the department was completely lost. So we need to educate them on that kind of thing. You're putting yourselves at risk, and we don't want our staff to do that. Eating in decontam. You would think nobody would ever do that. Yeah, they do. They eat, they drink in decontam, and the thought of it, it's just, it's scary. It's a nightmare. um, so, and then as far as you mentioned, Adam, the crucifix, the crucifix wouldn't have been such an issue, but the fact that it was made out of wood was the problem. So having stuff that's made of a porous surface that can't be properly cleaned. So, like, a lot of times we see organizers made out of wood to hold like peel pouches and stuff like that. Those kind of things can't be within the department. You can't clean it. You can't have it there. So that's what I always tell everybody. Everything in that department has to be a cleanable, wipeable surface. And so if you can't do it, you can't have it. Even your ceiling tiles. That's why our ceiling tiles have to be made of a certain material so that they can be cleaned and wiped. I feel like I just rambled. Okay.
No, that actually it's a lot, it is a lot to unpack there, Melinda,
It's,
but I think that that's normal with environmental issues. And I think one of the things that I believe that, listeners out there might benefit from is having people from the outside do some walkthroughs and, ask questions, whether it's ourselves or not, or maybe someone from their quality department or IP department to come and lay eyes on something that clearly a lot of them have just adjusted and acclimated to and no longer really see it anymore. Just a couple of your examples that you threw out there, dust bunnies in the peel pouch thing, that's a big one because everyone is, concerned about event related sterility. And you know what? Like, maybe that package is fine. Maybe that peel pouch is fine, but I've got some great pictures myself of, where I went to grab a peel pouch and out with it came dust bunnies like stuck to the packaging. And how are you supposed to open that over a sterile field or near a sterile field and not accidentally contaminate something? And the other component that you brought up that I thought was really, really important is the collaboration with EVS that seems to be missing, and the fact that part of that is us owning some of it. Like I wouldn't expect EVS to go and dust out the peel pouch containers. Okay, like that's something that we should do because um, you know, we're familiar with maintaining sterility of the packages. Maybe OR helps out, maybe supply chain might help out. But that really should be people who have that expertise knowledge. And EVS should be doing things that are similar to how they terminally clean an OR in the SPD on a nightly basis. And for those who may still not know, those AMI ST79 amendments that came out in, I think they're published 2020, but really came out in 2021. There's a lot of support there for them to, advocate for EVS to work with them in sterile processing. So a lot of really good things that you had to say there. And I think a lot of things that it's very easy for people to kind of become numb to. So great call outs. I did want to uh, kind of just check on one little segment too, because this is one that hits home for us here at Healthmark a little bit, is just looking at the automated washers. I feel like that's another thing. Yeah, we're known for the tests, but what about what you're just looking for, on a daily basis or even on when you come in for your shift into decontam? What are the things that you're seeing with automated washer issues? Just from an inspection standpoint or human error standpoint, that kind of thing.
yeah. Before we talk about that, one thing I did forget to mention with EVS is making sure that you have a written schedule that is being signed off on, and there's accountability. So I always tell everybody, when you create your EVS schedule, also create a section where sterile processing signs off on. So if they come in at night shift, the supervisor for night shift signs off. Yes, they account for they did the work and that kind of thing. It's not somebody just coming in and signing a paper and leaving. So, um, but to your question for washers, I would say, coming in, we know our basics, right? People are, I think, for the most part, we're all attuned to the fact that our washers have to be tested. We know that they've got to have some type of testing done on them on each day they're in use. Um, but I think there's some pieces that we miss, and that's, the filters in the bottom of your washer, making sure that those screen or filters, whatever you want to call them, are being cleaned on a daily basis. There's no debris and stuff stuck in there because those washers will pull all that back up and circulate that. So you want to make sure that you're cleaning that out. When you see it getting really nasty, even if it's not like, oh, the end of the day, maybe it's midday, that kind of thing, make sure you pull them out. I like to tell facilities you should be doing it on a shift. Each shift, the beginning of your shift, go through and clean them all out, and make sure that there's nothing in them. I think the other thing too is the spray arms for the washers. Um, not checking those. We see this all the time. They're being clogged. And when I ask people, are you checking the spray arms? And, I always get this confused look of like, what do you mean? Like they're there. And I'm like, but are you taking the caps off? Are you cleaning them out? Like, how often are you doing that? What does that look like? And when we take the caps off, the things that we find inside of them are pretty amazing, the debris and stuff in there. And just, our washers work on impingement, and just clogging one or two of those holes on those spray arms really reduces the amount of cleaning capability for those washers. So we really want to make sure that we're not having anything stuck in those holes and blocking and causing that reduced functionality. Um, I would say also, it's not the mechanics of the machine. It's a lot of it is about the way it's being loaded. And this is what we see all the time still is loading the washer improperly. Putting multiple layers, leaving them stacked together. We know that's a big no-no. One of the things that I usually get a surprise look about is finger mats, the silicone finger mats, nipple mats, whatever you call them. Those are supposed to be removed from the tray. They cannot go through the washer inside the tray. So per, IFUs for the washers and the IFUs from the finger mat, the silicone mats, whatever, they basically say you cannot put them through the washer inside the trays. So they can go through a washer. They're made for that, but not inside the tray because they don't allow for enough water to hit the instruments and detergent and stuff to actually hit the instruments and stuff. They actually impede it. So you want to make sure you're taking those out of your trays. Um, and then washing them either separately or, I like to tell people like, do a outside taco concept and just kind of put them between your two trays or something like that. This way they can be married together easily on the other side. So those are a couple things that we see, and just, or blocking the spray arms. Like you're loading the washer, but the spray arm just can't spin because you got, um, I don't know, a knee holder, is too big and too high and it's blocking the spray arms, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I mean, if you haven't checked out the webinar, it was the October monthly webinar that HealthMark does, Nightmare on SPD Street. Go check it out. Malinda, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners on, what can we do if we're seeing some of these things in our departments? A lot of times we have good intentions, but we have a hard time seeing these things in our own departments. What's your advice for listeners who might have some of these issues but don't realize it?
Yeah. I would say be cautious because Freddie's watching. No, just kidding. Uh, um, I would say, like, Kevin kind of hit on a good point. Have someone else walk through your department, and see what they notice, or, give maybe one of your techs, a audit form and just say, hey, go through the department. Um, I think to that point, we do get a little, blind to our environment and we don't really see certain things. And I think that's one of the great things about what we do with the CPRs is, it's just, it is that it's a friendly set of eyes coming in going, whoa, 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 time out kind of thing. But, it's, you got to take a step back. I would say just take a step back, and just look at your department piece by piece from an outside perspective and just say, if I didn't live here, what would I, be seeing? What would I be looking at? And I think too, it's just education, right? Listening to webinars, listening to podcasts, knowing and learning new information, and then going and applying that, right? And saying, okay, hey, I heard on this webinar, Adam was talking about inspecting your instruments, and we don't have a 4x magnifier for DaVinci. So we need that, right? Like, and go and implement those kind of things. Make a list of things that you need to change, and start with the easier things, your quote unquote low hanging fruit, and, start chomping away on that, and then move up and, to the harder things. But yeah, it's hard. I know it's rough. It is rough when you're in the thick of it, right? To the thick of it. Yeah. But you know, it it's things that you got to do, I guess.
Yeah, right. Any improvement, process improvement, anything like that that is, kind of difficult to do. It takes somebody driving that change at some point. And, whether it's a frontline tech or a manager or somebody, coming in to, be an outside set of eyes or what have you, it's all good if you can identify some opportunities and do something about it. So, at any rate, thank you so much,
Wait,
Malinda, for joining us.
Kevin,
Great job on the webinar. Yeah.
thanks.
What
Sorry.
do you got?
I just wanted to
Yeah.
say too, you just reminded me of something. A lot of things, a lot of us forget that usually you have a quality department and a
Hmm.
process improvement group and stuff. When you start looking at your department, you're like, oh, we got to fix this, this, and this, and this, and all this. It can be very overwhelming. Reach out to them. They are there to help you, and they will help create a plan and organize a process for you to help make those changes on a basis where you can handle it and do it, and you know graph out the not the changes, but what does it look like, the metrics for that, right? Like, how is that playing out? And doing PDSAs and stuff like that. So yeah, but sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
absolutely. Not everybody knows or is aware of even some of the resources that may be at their disposal, including, but not limited to project managers and whatever. So, you're absolutely right. So great. I think thoughts to wrap up on, and we appreciate you joining us on the podcast. Great job on the webinar. I definitely want to keep plugging that. So if you guys are actually listening to this podcast, please check out the webinar in the past webinar section of hmark.com. So thanks again, Malinda. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was a dream come true.
All opinions expressed on this episode are those of the presenters. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
For using any medical device, it's important to review the manufacturer's instructions for use and consult with a professional.
For any questions or feedback, please reach out to us at asktheeducator@hmark.com.